Now, can you guys hear us? Lance, Zach, Dale? Okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yes.
We
No,
checked the
yeah.
ones that we could see, so I think we've got everyone so far. Rob McDonald, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Helen Russell. Okay. John Evans.
I'm here.
Thank you. Rob Fisher or Lee Belt. Joe Steer.
Yes.
Yes. Todd Lavoie.
Yes.
Debbie Kling, I think I saw you.
Yes, I'm here.
And Dale Reynolds.
I'm here.
Okay. Dave Hershey or Trevor Chadwick. Jason Brinkman.
Yes.
Yes. And Mayor David Porterfield. Is he on? Maybe. Okay. All right, we do have a quorum.
Who has dialed in with a number ending in 8345?
That's me, Jordan Morales, City of Boise.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you.
Paula, I'm
Hi,
sorry.
and
I
this is-
also
this
jumped
is-
on late. Oh,
Oh, say that again.
go ahead.
This is Ashley Ford Squires. I never heard my name called, but I'm here.
Thank you, Ashley. We did count you before the audio got fixed, but thank you for speaking up.
Just check in.
Who was that? Sorry.
Caleb Hood.
Okay, very good.
Caleb, we just saw you. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Well,
Sorry
it's
for
good to
being
be-
tardy.
That is all right. We'll deduct it out of your salary, so no problem at all. And I'm guessing that Mr. Reynolds must have seen that he would have to sit next to me, and that's why he's online today, so he doesn't have to put up with me. But it's good to see you, Dale, and everybody else. So we'll go ahead and begin. There are no agenda additions or changes that I'm aware of, so I think we're good there. Which will move us into our consent agenda. So I would stand for a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
I second.
Thank you. So that's a motion from Jason and a second from Commissioner Daly. Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 And any opposed? So that motion passes. So that'll now move us into item number 4, special items. I don't believe we have anything. there.
We have no special items today.
Very good. That moves us into public comments. And I do not believe there's anybody here in the room for that. Is there anybody online that was wishing to have any public comments at this time?
We did hear from Ken Pijon that he doesn't have any today. So
Okay.
you know that.
Very good. And that's going to move us into number 6, action items A. So first is the vehicle donation policy. Leslie, turn it over to you.
Okay. So this starts on page 31 of your packet. It's the vehicle donation policy. It is an action item. Staff requests that the Board of Directors approve Resolution VBD 25-033 and adopt the vehicle donation policy. Some of the objectives that we were trying to accomplish by creating this policy is to enhance the community mobility and quality of life by donating surplus vehicles to eligible nonprofit organizations within our service area. And will also support our mission, support the nonprofits, and enhance the public transportation to ensure effective reutilization of surplus vehicles and promote sustainable practices, and establishes a standard practice to process donations requested. Thank you. Background to the policy, we typically auction our vehicles and the revenue is pretty insignificant to VRT. We have not had a documented policy or a standard process to consider any vehicle donations. And the donated surplus vehicles have gone to various nonprofit entities throughout the region upon request. Requirements to be eligible for a donation would be a registered 501c3 as a nonprofit organization. The organization must be located within our service area. The vehicle must be used solely for transportation-related services. And for the first year, we want quarterly statistics on what they've been operating. Some of the restrictions, we will not donate any vehicle that is valued more than $10,000. The vehicle cannot be used for personal purposes, and the vehicle cannot be used for election campaign purposes. The reason for the $10,000 cap, anything over that, we have to reimburse portion to the FTA, and it makes it a little messy if we donate something over that value. Any questions?
Thank you
As
so
you
much.
took a
Is there any questions from anyone?
This is Mayor Debbie. I have a quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
So when you say insignificant, obviously you're not donating things with a value of more than $10,000. But I have a question. Is the actual value more than 10? You're just bringing it down to avoid the process? And then if you have multiples, what do you consider significant versus insignificant?
For the insignificant, are you talking about the revenue that we collect?
Correct. You had just made a comment that it wasn't significant revenue. I don't remember. I think that's the word you used, but.
Yeah. So typically when we dispose a vehicle through an auction, we get anywhere between $3,000 to $5,000. We have got in excess of $8,000 a couple times, but it's pretty minimal. Mostly it's less than $2,000 is what we get because they're pretty used by the time we auction them off. If we do a fair market value assessment and it's over $10,000, we will not auction that vehicle, or we will auction the vehicle. We will not donate it because we have to pay some of those funds back to FTA because of the value.
Okay.
And Mayor Kling, just a little more information about that. While certainly it's a little bit of revenue because of we have to pay the cost for the auctioneer, et cetera. It very rarely goes for fair market value, even if fair market value is 10,000 or above. We think that there's probably more value to the region to have these vehicles available to these nonprofits than us collecting that little bit of revenue.
Mm-hmm. I don't disagree with your concept. So I thank you for explaining it to me. I just know that I had, at one point, I totally aligned with this philosophy. My city council in the past had asked me to do it differently and to go ahead and sell and not donate. But I thank you for bringing it to the board because it is a good decision and a discussion with the board based on the number of vehicles that you're taking out of service and what that could equal. Versus not. And I agree with your philosophy about the help that it can be to nonprofits. So thank you for answering my questions. No further comment.
Very good. Thank you so much. Any other questions? Yes.
My question is it's exclusively for nonprofits, correct?
Correct.
So if another entity wanted or needed it, it wouldn't be eligible?
That's correct.
Is there a reason for that?
Lillian, speak to this.
Thank you, Commissioner Daly. So if another service entity in our region needs vehicles, we do work with them to help them acquire vehicles. We would likely be able to sell them a vehicle, but if they're a for-profit provider, it doesn't seem reasonable that we would donate it to them.
Mr. Chairman, my question was more to a government entity, not a for-profit entity, or another government entity.
Another
government entity.
Yeah, so if it's a for-profit entity, we would not donate it to them. But
Sorry,
if it's a
typically for a
for-profit
government entity, we would do like a lease like we've done with ACHD Commuter Ride. We lease vehicles to or from them for like $1 a year as a government entity. That's probably how we would approach it if it was a government entity. We wouldn't donate it to them, but we could do a lease agreement with them for a minimal amount.
We would retain ownership
Yes,
and lease it.
yes.
So, but we do have a methodology for doing that, I guess was my real question.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, we already do that. And the reason to bring this forward is that while we have donated in the past, we didn't have a policy around it. And I felt uncomfortable continuing to do that without a formal policy that the board had adopted.
Jason?
Mr. Chairman, just a point of clarity, the policy mentions the vehicles reaching the end of their useful life or beyond their useful life. I guess I would seek to clarify it. That's in the context of useful to VRT. Presumably the vehicle still has utility at that point.
If it doesn't have utility, we wouldn't even think to donate it. We would just scrap it. That's our typical process. But yes, in our transit asset management plan, we have useful life benchmarks we could do for each type of vehicle.
Any other questions?
Just one more comment, if I could, Mr. Chair. The reason that we're asking these entities to provide us ridership for the first year is so that we can understand if they're being used in a way that is valuable, so that we'll know ongoing whether we need to make any adjustments in this policy.
Very good. And then if there's not any other questions, well, this is just yes, an action item. So I would ask for a motion.
This is Mayor Debbie, and I would move that we approve resolution VBD 25-033 and adopt the vehicle donation policy 6.04.08.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second that.
Thank you so much. Was that you, Mr. Reynolds?
It was. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. That's a motion from Mayor Kling and a second from Council Member Del Reynolds for passage of this resolution. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, well, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? And that motion passes. That'll move us into action item 6B. This is a legislative policy position update. And Elaine, this is yours.
All right, thank you. I think I'll sit here for this one. Jason will run the PowerPoint. You'll remember that last meeting I brought to you federal policy positions and asked your guidance on those, and you gave me direction to continue working on all of those. We have also been working on state legislative policy. And so today I'm bringing to you what we've learned so far and the next step we'd like to take to do that. With me today is Lance Giles. He's the government affairs consultant that VRT has engaged to work with us on this particular issue. Next slide, please. So this is an action item. I do request that the board approve our recommendation that we work toward a draft legislation with our state partners. While we have some draft language, we have not really talked to any state partners about it and wanted to get to a point where we understood if those state partners were really serious. I'd like to say I could tell you what that draft legislation is going to say, but knowing what those state partners usually do, rather than do that, just an outline of what we're asking for, and then we'd bring back to you anything that we actually draft once we get some input and some understanding about where those state leaders are, if that makes sense. Next slide. So a summary of where we are, and I'll let Lance at the end will summarize where we'll go after this, if you guys agree to let us go forward. We've been having ongoing discussions all over the state about the need for dedicated funding for transit systems in Idaho. We've met with legislators, we've met with local leaders, we've met with other transit agencies. And we have carried with us in those conversations a consistent message that transit in Idaho really does need direct, consistent, and stable funding so that we can provide the kind of attractive, efficient, and reliable transit service in communities around the state. As I mentioned, there's no agreement on specific legislation, but there has been a growing recognition and support that transit can fill part of the transportation need as the state grows, and that it's vital to the long-term ability of the state and local regions to support travel for all residents. So given that, we feel like we're at a point in time where it makes sense to quit talking around the issue and start getting down to specifics. Next slide, please. So as we've had these conversations, including last year's Transit Day at the Capitol, the idea that has emerged that seems to have the most support is to simply treat regional public transportation authorities the same as every other political subdivision in the state of Idaho and allow them levy authority, recognizing that that's not giving transit authorities anything. It's allowing them the authority to ask for a vote that would require a 66 2/3 majority to pass. And as I said, all other, with the exception of housing authorities and solid waste districts, which have fee authority, all other political subdivisions have this authority, including mosquito abatement districts and fire districts and libraries and all kinds of up and down the scale in terms of importance to our lives, gives them a way to have consistent, stable funding through this levy authority. So the question before you today is, should we work with those partners who have sort of coalesced around this idea to really draft some legislation that grants local levy authority to VRT and other regional public transportation authorities around the state, so that they could then ask the question of their voters if they were so inclined. And we believe that if we draft this legislation, we'll quickly learn whether or not people are serious when they say they think that's a good idea. So that's why we'd like to get to that point. And Lance, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Thank you, Executive Director Clegg, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Lance Giles. I'm the Government Affairs Consultant for VRT. Over the past year, we've had some really good conversation with legislators and other key stakeholders. As Executive Director Clegg mentioned, we need to come up with a draft and then start circulating that around to see what people really think. So if you give Executive Director Clegg the authority to move forward, we'll be able to go through that process during the remainder of the fall and during the legislative session and see where things are. We do have another day at the Capitol scheduled for February 12th. So I think we'll also have a really good opportunity there with other transit providers in the state there as well. So with that, I'll just open it up for any questions that Mr. Chairman or members of the board have. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lance. Appreciate it. Appreciate you being here as well and all the work you do down in the Capitol. So questions from any, sorry, your chip bag keeps hiding your light. Commissioner Daly. So Commissioner Daly.
But I think he has a question as well. But mine is, in this context, who are the partners that will be participating?
We've been talking to state legislators, and obviously if you're going to draft legislation, it would have to go through LSO and a legislator. So that would be who would help draft the legislation. Then we would distribute it to other partners, which include other local agencies as well as our other transit agencies around the state and business groups. The Boise Metro Chamber currently has an effort, for instance, to promote transit funding.
So that would be, do we have a list of the partners that you're going to be, and the next question is, you would be the one discussing on behalf of VRT, or would there be a group of people, or?
So to begin with, it will be Lance and I. The reason I think it's important that we get draft legislation, then this board can discuss, do you want to have an active role in it? And if so, what and how? But right now, without legislation, it's sort of difficult to get to that point.
Just one more follow-up. So the request, though, then is the draft legislation would be just in the context of the 66 and 2/3% vote on that would be the focus of the draft legislation.
The concept at this point is that, and it was in the memo, that it would be typical levy authority that goes to any political subdivision, which is a property tax that takes a 66 and 2/3 majority. In this case, the concept is that it would be limited to no more than a mill. That's up for discussion, obviously. The other concept is that it would be only eligible to be voted on in a November election. That also would be up for discussion. Would it be an even year November election or any November election? Those are the basics, assumptions around how we'd start the draft. But like I said, until you get into those details, you don't find out where the actual position is on it.
Yes, I guess that was my real question. Is the extent, is it very narrow, or is it a wide open at this point in time discussion on local funding for transit?
Well, certainly there's wide open discussion on local funding for transit. I guess the notion is, as we've had our discussions, and Lance can pipe in on this, this is the idea that has received the most nods of, oh, that makes sense. Maybe we should at least look at it. We've received some clear no's on some other ideas. Certainly on an income tax, which some states use, and lots of ambivalent feelings around a local option sales tax. I recognize there's an effort afoot to do local option sales tax, and certainly, applaud that effort. I think having more options is typically a good thing. But the conversations we've had today, both locally and at the state level, indicate to us that this is the idea that seems to have the most support. And we think drafting legislation will suss out whether that's true or not, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but back to what you're saying, this at least gives us a benchmark to evaluate what the interest is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions? Jason?
Mr. Chairman, I think Elaine already answered part of my question. I presumed we were talking about a property tax as opposed to other local option or resort tax or things. I guess a related question on that, is there a well-defined service area for a regional transit authority that would make clear where the boundaries of a tax levy would apply?
So the idea we've talked about, again, as sort of the basics going into this, is that it would be a county level vote.
Any questions from anybody online?
Well, so the county, if this is Mayor Debbie, the county level vote, so it's by county. So Ada County would vote, Canyon County would vote. Is that what I'm understanding?
I believe, as I understand how property tax is levied in the state, that would have to be how the election would run. That's one of the things I want to find out, if that assumption is correct. Our service area is the 2-county area, but we were originally formed with a vote in each county. And I believe we have to stay with that, as I understand it. We'll find that out.
Thank you for that. Actually, I support this and I think it's a good idea. And the reason I do is that it's hard for me to comprehend why we voted to approve a regional transit, Valley Regional Transit, with no funding. It makes no sense to me because then the local municipalities can't even go after funding separately. So by putting this to a vote of the people get to choose if they would like to do that. Whereas right now we've got city councils deciding, the cities are trying to decide out of their budgets, are they going to approve funding or not? For a regional transportation authority to function, it cannot be this community's in, that community's out, right? And please, you're the expert, Elaine, and others in this room, not myself. But to me, it makes sense. And if a county says no as a county, then we need to address it as a county and figure out what we're going to do. Do we stay in with Valley Regional Transit or do we not? I mean, that would be a huge step backwards, not a good idea. However, it would get us out of the place where we are today, which I don't think is working well. So it's just my thoughts as I'm talking out loud off the top of my head. I would love to hear feedback from someone else.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please.
unless somebody else wants.
Commissioner Daly.
I guess that's why I was asking the question, like Mayor Kling was saying, in terms of the partners, because as we all know, and it's a property, if it would be a property tax based, which I'm assuming it would be, those are all independent taxing districts that create that. At the county level is where the levy is imposed, but it's based on budgets that are established by the individual taxing districts. So that's why it's going to be much more complicated than, because as the mayor was saying, it's a regional thing, but it's independent taxing districts. So if the county, if you did it countywide, just as an example, Ada County voted yes, then it would come out of the Ada County taxing district budget, or would it be imposed on the cities and other taxing jurisdictions? Because we have 41 taxing districts in Ada County.
It would establish regional public transportation authorities as another taxing district. And right now, the way the Regional Public Transit Authority statute is written is that they are county-wide. And so it would be an additional county-wide taxing district for an RPTA, as I understand how the legislation would. That's what I want to find out. Is that the correct way to write that legislation? The other, what I think would be very challenging is if the district boundaries were different than the county, or if it required a separate vote at each city, it becomes even more complicated and less certain. And this seems like the most simple way that follows the current statute. So it would be an additional taxing district, but it would be countywide.
Exclusively countywide. In other words, not like the College of Western Idaho, which is a larger taxing entity, multi-county entity. I guess that's why I was asking the question. That's all. That's all you're going to be. Those are the kinds of things you're going to be exploring, I guess is my real question.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes. Who? Please identify yourself.
Ryan Davidson, Ada County.
Hey, thank you so much.
My question is, I mean, if Ada County voted for funding and Canyon County didn't, would Canyon County be cut out of the funding? Like, how does that work when two different counties might come to two different conclusions?
Great question, Commissioner. My understanding would be that in Ada County, our funding would then flow through that new taxing district, whereas in Canyon County, we'd still be eligible to ask various partners to participate with funding on a voluntary contribution basis like we do today.
Did you have a follow-up, Commissioner Davidson?
No.
Okay. Good. Any other questions?
So I guess just to summarize here, so we all understand what we're voting on here. So what we would be voting on if we voted to approve this would be the partners, and you've delineated the partners that are currently, I guess, assuming currently participating cities, counties, to do an exploratory mechanism focusing on this, the taxing district, but possibly other methods for funding that would.
What we're asking for today is that we work specifically with state partners, including LSO and state legislators, to draft legislation that would be based on this discussion today, which would be a property tax at a county level, create a new taxing district for regional public transportation authorities. Doesn't foreclose the opportunity for the partners around this table or other partners to talk about other funding mechanisms, but it does identify how exactly we would pursue a funding mechanism that was based on a new taxing district. Does that make sense?
I think I understand what you're saying, but I guess my apprehension is that I think we're moving. I think we need to have the partners discussing that first before we go to LSO with a proposal that may go to the legislature in a form that either is not supported by certain entities, counties, cities. I think we need to have more of a coalesced process of getting to LSO first before we go there and create a piece of legislation potentially that may be disjointed in terms of its support among the partners. I guess that's my only apprehension, that we're kind of moving too fast to LSO before we've gotten a kind of a consensus among the partners.
So this is Debbie. Could I take a stab at making a motion?
Sure.
So I would move that we approve the request to work toward draft legislation with state partners with the anticipation that the draft legislation comes back to the VRT Board of Directors before it moves on to LSO.
Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Is that you, Councilman Reynolds?
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay, so that is a motion from Mayor Kling and a second from Council Member Reynolds for approving the request toward working for VRT staff working towards draft legislation with the caveat that any draft would come back before the board prior to be presented to LSO. Does that summarize that motion correct, Mayor Kling?
Yes, it does. And then my question would be, does that help alleviate Commissioner Dale's concerns?
And could I ask one quick question before we ask Commissioner Daly that? And I appreciate this motion. I think it does. LSO typically is just involved in helping draft the legislation so that we don't draft something that isn't constitutional or isn't legal. So I would want to make sure that to the extent they are involved just in telling us if it's appropriate or not, that we allow them to be involved. The other clarification is as soon as we have something, we could bring it to the executive board at their next meeting, followed by then bringing it to the full board in January, if that would be acceptable, just so we can get some interim direction and rather than waiting 3 months to get further direction.
And then Commissioner Daly, as we get to you and trying to put my legislature hat back on and remembering, so maybe you can remember better than me, if we need to have a legislator working with LSO. I don't think just anybody can go in there. I think you have to have a legislator. Is that correct? Okay. And then, go ahead with your.
Well, I think Jason had a question first that might be appropriate to what we're talking about.
Mr. Chairman, discussion on the motion. Is VRT currently the only regional transit provider in Idaho? Or are there other regional transit providers in Idaho?
Sorry, we are currently one of three regional public transportation authorities in the state. I say that officially, there's one in Ada County, one in Canyon County, which have joined to provide regional services. And there's another one in Bonneville County, which it provides services under the name of GIFT, Greater Idaho Falls Regional Transit.
I guess follow on to that, Mr. Chairman, if this were to attract interest, I'm curious what the role of those providers might be. Presumably it would be open to all regional transit providers if this mechanism were to come to be.
As we've talked to folks around the state, it's likely, I think, that there's one other region that might pursue this. Beyond that, I think probably, frankly, would take quite an effort anywhere else. So it's not opening up a big floodgate all over the state, but it is offering the opportunity.
Mr. Daly.
Mr. Chairman, yes, the chairman and Elaine both. Yes, it's correct. We have to have a legislator before we go to LSO to actually get it. And LSO's role is not to impose the issue on somebody. Is to say, you tell them the issue, and then they say, here's where we have to amend the law, here's what has to be done, so forth, as you well know, Elaine, just for everybody to understand. So what we're doing here is, based on that motion, I would support the motion in this context of that we do go to LSO, because I think we need to be exploring options. But I said that I think there's a lot of complicating factors there. That's why I said what I said about LSO, because I think we need to have some kind of a coalesced request of LSO, not just go in there and make a general request. We have to have some parameters around it for the legislator, or to give us a purple slip so that we could actually do the dialogue ourselves if a legislator did that. But some kind of a circle so that we don't just say everything in the world on mass transit in a regional sense.
So the circle, and I'll let Lance pipe in here too, the circle that I have tried to draw today is that it would be based on the existing Regional Public Transportation Authority statute. So it would be countywide. It would establish a new taxing district if you were able to get that vote. And within that taxing district would allow up to 1 mil levy specifically for transit, based on an approved plan for that transit. I mean, I didn't say that previously, but I think we've all assumed always that voters are not going to vote for something that's just, willy-nilly. There'd be a plan associated with it, and that would take a 66 2/3 vote that would be in a November election. Within that box, there might be further restrictions as the discussion goes forward, but that's the sideboards we have thought about at this point.
Lance, do you want to touch on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In working with LSO and a legislator, we can get multiple drafts on different ideas if necessary. And I think one of the key components is Commissioner Daly knows is these drafts are confidential, so they can't be shared with other folks. So they're usually, as you may recall, they're referred to as routing slips. But in this case, before we even get there, it would just be a discussion draft, so we could get 2 or 3 drafts, that change on different ideas, and then the board can come back and say, yeah, this is the one that we'd like you to pursue or not pursue, or something like that.
And would love direction on what kinds of things should be in those.
And that's what I was going to ask. Would it be appropriate for board members to email, whether it's Lance or you, Elaine, their thoughts on what should and should not be included? Would it be preferable to go to Lance or to you, or both?
I think if they come to me, I'll certainly share them with Lance.
This is Mayor
Other thoughts,
Debbie.
discussions?
So this is Mayor Debbie. Elaine, I like what you've outlined. I would suggest maybe you put that in writing and send it out to everyone. Unless it was written out like that and I didn't see it. So that they can, and a timeline for them to get back to you. And then I would be happy to amend my motion and have, and state the executive committee versus the full board so that we can allow it to move forward. It still needs to come to the full board, but if the initial look came to the executive committee and then it went to LSO, but you've already got a really good outline that you're suggesting. So however the motion, I don't want it to be so restrictive. I do respect commissioners' comments regarding LSO and when to go. So finding that correct balance in the motion so it allows it to move forward, but it isn't a hindrance.
And I
So
think
if there's-
that
Go ahead.
sorry, Mayor, I think the intent is that you would not have a full draft legislation because LSO would help to get you to that full draft legislation.
And if I'm understanding it, Madam Mayor, part of your comments, your motion would be amended to instruct me to send out an email with the sideboards that we've outlined that the legislation would be based on. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Can do.
And obviously,
Thank
all these
you.
questions and answers are dependent on whether this motion passes or not on that. But is there any other discussion or questions in regards to the motion?
My second is still good on that amended motion.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Councilman Reynolds. Okay, so with that, then the big motion.
Mr.
again
Chair?
is, yes.
I was just requesting for a restatement of the motion.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much, Commissioner Davidson. So I will try to restate the motion. And if it needs change, let me know, Mayor Kling, if I don't address your motion correctly. So the motion is for approval of the request for VRT staff to work towards a draft legislation with state partners, which would include LSO and others, and knowing that they will work with LSO prior to draft legislation coming back before the executive board to make sure they're on the right path.
And before that happens, I will send out a memo to all board members with the sideboards we've discussed today that legislation would be based on.
Mr. Chair,
Is it,
Yes, Commissioner.
I'd like to offer an amendment to the motion.
Okay, yes, please.
Basically tack on to the end that any proposed legislation to be formally submitted to the legislature for their calendar be done with a 2/3 vote of this body.
Okay, do we have a second to that amended motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, so it was seconded by Commissioner Daly. So I'm trying to get back to my Robert's Rules of Orders. I don't know if we have that here or not, but so we do have an amended motion. And so we're going to take that up first. And if that passes and we're done, if not, we'll go back to the original motion. So the amendment of the motion was basically the intent of the original motion, but also adding the parameters of a 2/3 required majority vote of the full VRT board. Is that correct, Commissioner Davidson? Not the executive.
correct.
But okay. So 2/3 majority vote of the full VRT board before that were to move forward after the research done with LSO.
Yes.
Okay,
So this
very
is
good.
Mayor Debbie.
Yes.
Could I ask a quick question?
Mhm.
Would getting it before the board be a challenge before we go to LSO? So what is we need to set some timelines so we can meet the timeline so we can get it addressed this legislative session. So when is our next board meeting? In December? Do we have a January board meeting or February?
Yeah, we have a January board meeting. So, and again, just to clarify, ultimately, if it were to be filed as legislation, it's not through LSO, it's through a legislator who would sponsor it. So as I'm understanding what we're being asked today is that we work with a legislator or legislators to work with LSO to create some draft legislation, and we could do we wouldn't have to do just one. We could bring more than one draft discussion, comments back or pieces of legislation back to the executive board and then the full board for comment. And before that was ever proposed as legislation by a legislator, it would require that we meet with the full board and that the full board vote by 2/3 majority to support it. I would have to look at our bylaws in terms of what kind of voting procedures we have in place for how to do that. I think it's possible, but I would have to pull up the bylaws and look to see if it's 2/3 of who's present at that meeting or 2/3 of the full board and all of those details, because we've never had any requirements for those kinds of votes in our board.
Yeah, and I was actually just thinking, and that actually might be determined by the maker of the motion of what his or her desires were, if they wanted it 2/3 of the full body or 2/3 of those present. Commissioner Davidson, in that regards to that, what was your intent on that motion for the 2/3? Those present at the meeting or of the full membership?
Well, Mr. Chair, assuming there's not a bylaw that would override this, I would say my intent would be 2/3 of those present.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that clarification. And you're good with that, Commissioner Daly? On that
Yes.
Clarification. Okay. And then again, also, of course, reviewing that with the bylaws of the Valley Regional Transit.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
and again, I agree with Mayor Kling. We need to put some timelines, all of this, so that if we want the January as the final product, we need to put some timelines in your notice to everybody.
I guess my recommendation on that would be that we bring something back at the next executive board meeting, which would be in November. That after that executive board meeting, depending on what the executive board recommends, we send out a memo to the full board, allowing for comment. If we need to call a special board meeting in December to have a discussion, that's a possibility. If we don't, we would then bring it to the January board to decide if we're ready to support at least, remembering that even if legislation is filed, that's only means that it's for discussion. It's not that the legislation is going anywhere, but a vote to do that.
Yeah, basically just if it's going to become an RS routing slip to even see if it gets a hearing on that. So, and that obviously doesn't need to be part of the motion. So we do have the motion as was stated before, and I believe we're probably good with discussion. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and take a vote. So all those in favor of the amended motion, please indicate by saying aye.
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 And any opposed? Okay, very good. So that motion appears.
Mr. Chair, can you
Yes.
tell me who made the motion? And
So, yes, sorry. The amended motion was made by Commissioner Davidson and seconded by Commissioner Daly. And it did pass, so we will not go back to the original motion as the amended motion did pass unanimously. Okay, very good. So that will now move us to,
No nays.
yeah, no nays were recorded. And so we now onto information. So I'm trying to get back to the top of my thing here. So our first informational item is high capacity transit planning, and this is Mr. Austin Miller, currently with Compass, former with ACHD, my former coworker at ACHD. So always great to see Austin. So the time is yours.
And thank you all for the great discussion on the legislation. I really appreciate the opportunity to move forward and appreciate your support to begin having these discussions in earnest. Thanks, Austin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. He's too generous. I believe the title at the time was intern. So thank you for all the leadership you provided both then and now. Let me just adjust the view on my screen here a little bit real quick. Anyway, Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you so much for having me here today. Again, my name is Austin Miller. I am the principal planner and planning team lead at Compass. And I wanted to thank Elaine for giving me the opportunity to come and share with you all about Let's Ride Treasure Valley. This is the Regional High Capacity Transit Planning and Environmental Linkages Study we over at Compass have been working on for nearly 2 years now. So in this presentation, I wanted to give you all a rundown of the project, starting with the purpose and need, the process we took from both a screening and input perspective, and then get to the results and really what those next steps are moving forward. So for decades, us as a region have been conducting various local studies looking at high capacity transit in the Treasure Valley, specifically Ada and Canyon counties. However, these studies were exactly that. They were local studies. So while beneficial in many ways, they didn't move us forward in terms of a federal process. So in discussion with FHWA as well as FTA, it was recommended that we conduct what they call a Planning and Environmental Linkages, or PEL study, to help build on that past local planning and set us up for success in the federal process. So the PEL would not only help us clearly define the purpose and need of the project, but it would also help us streamline future environmental review process and allow us to formally narrow the potential options for high capacity transit in our region. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, we've been doing this project for a little bit of time now. So this project kicked off in 2024, starting with some collaborative efforts to formalize what the purpose and need would be for the PEL study. This would then inform how we would go about developing the screening and determining what our alternatives are and how to move them forward. And as we are near the end of the process right now, we're actually currently developing the implementation chapter of that final PEL document. I will briefly walk through each of these with a little bit more detail as we go. So after some early discussion, the purpose of the project is to improve mobility, accessibility, and efficiency of our transit system, really focusing on that east-west travel pattern between Boise, Meridian, Nampa, and Caldwell, and then specifically looking at key areas that are best suited for high-capacity transit use. Why do we feel this is needed? Well, this will come as no surprise to anyone here. Our region is growing, and we are not forecasting that to stop. So dealing with the current and forecast growth in both population and jobs, we do see that east-west travel pattern as the predominant travel pattern, not only now, but in the future. And with our estimates and all of this growth, we do forecast that congestion will continue to get worse in Ada and Canyon counties. So we're trying to find other ways to address the transportation stress that we're seeing from the growth our valley is experiencing. So now that we know what we are trying to accomplish and why, how do we determine what the best form of transit is, where that service should run, and how does it provide the most benefit to our region? So the PEL process is a tiered process, each with its own public and stakeholder engagement tied to it. And you start by really throwing all of the options out there. Then in tier 1, this is really just a high level fatal flaw analysis. So does the route support the previously established purpose and need? In tier 2, it's more of a comparative analysis at that point, where it gets qualitative and quantitative, again, with that critical engagement component included to determine amongst those routes which one is most beneficial. And then tier 3 is that final step where we get that most detail. This step could have originally left us with a total of 3 alternatives. However, we'll get to this a little bit later. The results were conclusive enough that we were able to narrow that down to 1, and we were able to get federal concurrence on that point. So the range of alternatives that we looked at always includes the no action, or we can call it a no build option. This stays on the table throughout, just for sort of level setting and context. But for tier 1, we looked at 10 additional alternative routes, each with their own pros and cons. You can see they're ranging anywhere from Chinden on the north side to Victory there on the southern side of the planning area. In tier 2, we took the routes that did meet the purpose and need in tier 1, and then we tied a mode to them. So this is where we determined whether bus rapid transit in a center lane versus bus rapid transit potentially on a shoulder would be more beneficial, or if it would be some form of rail alternative. And then we could compare each of those alternatives to each other. We then created scoring criteria based on the goals that were included in the purpose and need of the project. So this landed us with our top 3 alternatives that made it to that third and final screening tier. So we had an arterial option that started in Caldwell and ran along the Nampa-Caldwell Boulevard and along Garrity, Franklin, and Fairview. This one was a bus rapid transit alternative with exclusive center lane travel. We also had a rail option that was commuter rail along the Union Pacific Main Line out in Canyon County, then turned on to the cutoff in Nampa and followed that into Ada County. We also had a freeway option that was side running bus rapid transit along Interstate 84 and Interstate 184 into Boise. Similar to tier 2, we had a quantified screening process for this as well that compared how these alternatives fared against each other in terms of best supporting the goals for high capacity transit in our region. There's certainly a lot here. So a little summary slide. The key takeaways were that arterial alternative, ooh, tongue twister there, was best at tying into the existing bike and pedestrian infrastructure, as that corridor is relatively built out. Thankfully, those active transportation, the infrastructure needed for that is already in place. The freeway alternative, it had the fewest impacts on those other surface streets. So again, a little intuitive here is what that strength was. And then the Boise cutoff rail alternative did notably have the most benefits, ranging from travel time, economic impacts, potential for future growth, things like that. So we took these findings out to the public for the third and final time. And really, we wanted to get their thoughts, make sure we had hit the mark as we worked through each step of this. And the results were pretty overwhelming. 80% of the responses we got did favor the rail option that we had provided, with 10% feeling that each of the other opportunities was what was best for the region. So with the technical analysis as well as the public input both pointing us in the same direction, we were able to narrow it down to one preliminary locally preferred alternative, being the commuter rail option along that existing rail corridor, again, connecting the downtown areas of Caldwell, Nampa, Meridian, and Boise. So now that we've done all that, what's next? Well, like I mentioned earlier, we're drafting the implementation plan at the moment, so there is still more information to come. Our board of directors will ultimately be seeing that final product in their February board meeting for their final acceptance. With that said, we hope that our plans always help lead us towards implementation. In this project specifically, we're hoping to streamline that process. So while we are nearing the end of the Pell study itself, it is still relatively early on in that federal process. So with completion of the Pell, we could move into NEPA and dive further into design and environmental review. However, we do still need an identified funding source. So this is where meetings like this with you all as the elected leaders to our region is really critical. I do also know that Elaine is a tremendous asset to our region and is really already running with the baton. So wanted to again express Compass's gratitude to not only Elaine, but also Stephen and Kate and VRT staff for their tremendous support as we've worked through this process, and really for their continued efforts ahead as we know we're not done yet. So with that, I am glad to stay here for any questions you all may have. Also, my contact information is on the screen if anyone wants to reach out. I am very much willing and able to discuss further.
All right, thank you so much. Questions for Mr. Miller? Yes, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, I guess through all of these processes, because we've, as you know, we've just had a long discussion about funding. How was funding included in the process of the evaluation? Not the least of which, when the public was given their alternatives, were they given any kind of dollar figures and how much it was going to cost them? I just as an aside, this is why I'm asking the question. I just read a study about the transit, the light rail in Puget Sound area, and it's costing about $55,000 a person for that development slash. So was the public given any kind of information when they voted for light rail, just as an example, and using the rail as the cost, and what would that cost them to do that? Or they just, oh, this is a great thing to do and we think that's the best alternative? Or as my father used to say, nothing is a good deal if you don't have the money for it.
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Daly. So funding was included, however, more at high level. Because we were so early on in the planning and design process, there is a wide range of what the costs could be. So when we went out to the public, we showed it in terms of like how many dollar signs are we actually talking here, and what options might cost a little bit more than the others. So we did show that the rail option is likely going to be the costlier option. However, based on the feedback that we had received, broad terms speaking, they did feel it was still the most beneficial from that standpoint. However, directly to the question, was a specific number provided to them? It was not at the time, as the range is, we feel it's still so broad. We didn't provide that in the public outreach.
But Commissioner Daly, the range was not way different. So the range was somewhere between 2 billion and 2.5 billion nominally for all of them, with the rail potentially being at the high end.
Mr. Chairman,
Just follow up.
just to follow up. So as we move through this process, is the study going to be able to provide us / the public that information in a more refined way? Because you said it was as Elaine said, at the large 40,000 foot level. But as we refine it, are we going to refine the dollar amount as well?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Daly, to a degree, it's still going to be very high level, not to go too terribly far back in my slides, but because even at the end of the Pell document, the design is still very high level, our cost estimates are going to be very high level. At our Compass Board of Directors meeting, I do have some of the numbers here, like Elaine was mentioning. We did provide some broad estimates, and we also provided comparative estimates on what has actually been built or is at least a little bit further in design. I think it was North Carolina, a project there, Utah, South Carolina, and Colorado, to give people a sense of what to expect. And in the implementation plan, I think we're going to try to refine that a little bit. However, it's not really going to be narrowed down to a more definitive point until we get further on into a a future process beyond this, Pal.
One of the things that we learned from this is that this is the preliminary locally preferred alternative, which offers us the opportunity to do a further study on it, at which time we can narrow down some of the alternatives within it, including, do you double track the whole thing? Do you use the existing, really the basic question, you use the existing rail for commuter rail type services and not introduce a full new light rail, which would be, I think, prohibitively expensive. Once you answer that, then within that, do you double track the entire thing? Does it require that to run it efficiently? What's the cost of that? Are there any grade separated crossings? What are the costs of that? Once we begin answering those questions, we can home in on whether or not there are places to value engineer it and save money or not. And as I look around the country, the places that attempt to do it within a reasonable cost, I have been successful in being able to do that. So I have confidence that if we, with the ethic that I see in Idaho of doing things as well as we can, as efficiently as we can for the least cost, I think we'll find that. But right now, we don't have enough information to know what those choices are. If that makes sense.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and Elaine. I guess my concern is if we consider this our current locally preferred alternative, is that using all the data to make that decision? Because money, as we've already discussed in the legislative process, one of the limitations on VRT as well is money, the limitation money and where we get the money from. How we function here is based on that. So I guess that's my concern about having a locally preferred alternative that may not be the locally preferred alternative in a monetary sense, even though it may be the local preferred alternative in lots of other ways. Again, back to what my father used to tell me, nothing is a good deal if you don't have the money for it. So it may be the best thing in the world, but if we don't have the money for it, we still can't do it.
Totally agree.
Yeah, Mayor Klink, go ahead, I believe.
Yeah. So thank you so much. I appreciate the commissioner's comments, and I totally, I don't disagree with the issue regarding funding, but I was going to say, first of all, Austin, great job. This has been a really good process. I think it's been very well done. I think the timing is critical, and this is what it's going to take for us to be able to move forward. It's going to take federal funding. Sidebar, I think Trump just canceled some funding to California for a major project. We need to get that. So that's kind of neither here nor there. But my thought is it's going to take federal funding. It's going to be beyond the state of Idaho. But whatever we do to, and this was the agreed upon preferred alternative option, anything we do is going to be very expensive, no matter what we do. But we need to get it moving forward. So I think Compass is the right Compass in partnership with VRT together. I think we are the ones that need to be getting this done and moving up forward. And Austin, great job. I think we need to continue to move up forward. I appreciate the effort. And yes, there's a lot of work yet to be done, but we need to get to that moving forward with the NEPA and the preliminary design and environmental.
Thank you. Any other questions? So don't go anywhere. I did have one or maybe two, but I wanted to just make sure on that. So good news, Commissioner Daly, is I did some quick math, 2.5 billion divided by, say, 800,000 residents. It's only $3,100 per person here for this. So that is a bit cheaper than the other number that you had. So that's the high number. But
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
That was the operational costs, not the construction costs.
And that actually that leads into what my question was going to be, because typically these do not make money or even break even. So that was kind of the question was, if it is, when it, we'll say when, because it does need to get constructed sooner or later. So when it is constructed, has there been any thought or discussion about the funding of continuing that to be able to afford to make sure it continues? Because obviously probably not going to break even. There's going to still be funding needed. Has there been the discussion on what that is expected to be each year and where that funding comes from?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So there have been high-level conversations. In order to go into NEPA, you do have to have, while the federal government can support the capital investment and the infrastructure needed to get it off the ground, an operational budget and a funding source to be able to keep this operating moving forward is something that would need to be identified. So while that's the missing step that we have at the moment, and that we as a region certainly want to come together and help support those conversations. Compass is certainly glad to assist in those conversations in any way we can. We do not have that necessarily solved yet, and is what we're working on.
Very good. I know that's probably down the road. And then the other question, do you mind going to the map that kind of showed the connection between? Is because I know this question has come up in some discussions that I've had with some other mayors and some meetings, is a connection to Micron with the thousands of new jobs that are being created out there and the millions of miles to the roadways that'll add. Has there been thoughts or discussion about, okay, we get this done, how do we get a connection out to Micron so that people are able to take it out to there for all those new thousands of jobs?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that is one thing that did actually come out of the Pell that necessarily hadn't been dove into with as much detail in some of our previous local planning efforts. We looked at not only access to Micron, but also the Boise Airport, as those were two really key destinations that we felt didn't fall along this corridor. Ultimately, where we landed, and part of it was due to public feedback, is that those are sort of two separate projects from this main spine that we're hoping to get built. So one of the considerations that we certainly didn't lose sight of moving forward is the ability to connect into either a future extension down to Micron, or really Mountain Home is something that has been also brought up a lot. However, it was just beyond the scope of what we were trying to do with this project. So we're not prohibiting future connections, however, not making it there exactly right now. Just for your awareness as well, some of the comments that we did receive regarding Micron specifically was a little bit of concern that if that extension is made solely to serve one private company, what is that private company's responsibility or role in helping fund such an effort? We haven't had to flesh that answer out yet, as again, we're stopping a little bit short of there, but that is some feedback we had received just for you to be aware of.
No, perfect. Appreciate that very much. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just offer a couple of comments. So one, both the rail and the freeway get within shouting distance of Micron and or all of the industrial development out there. So while about 6,000 of those jobs will likely ultimately be Micron jobs, another 10 to 12,000 will be other private entities out there. So it wouldn't necessarily be a stop for one company, although certainly I understand why that's kind of the perception today. But the freeway interchange at Gowan is also about 500 yards from where the rail crosses Eisenman. So either of these two alternatives could easily serve Micron as well. And so as we go forward with the rail as the preliminary locally preferred alternative, that's one of the things I think folks will keep in mind. The other thing that I've learned since I came into this job, and I think it's an interesting one for this region to think about right now, because we don't have any rail, we don't get any of the federal formula funding that goes to regions that have rail. If we were to establish this, we would have to have full operating funding for probably the first year and a half. And at that point, we'd get new additional formula funding from FTA that would be 50% of whatever we'd spent on an annual basis in that year and a half. So it would offer us the opportunity to get federal funding that we don't have today. And rail also is projected to be probably the highest ridership of any of these alternatives because of both the speed and the attractiveness of rail. Given that, the mayor is absolutely right. No transportation, whether it be air, driving, transit, rail, whatever it is, none of it makes money. But rail has been the one around the country that's proven to get the closest to breaking even because the attractiveness of the ride is enough that you can get a bigger fare box return than you can on a lot of other things.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you so much, Austin. Appreciate it. Excellent job as always.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Okay, so our next information item is Transportation Development Plan update from Elaine, Stephen, and Kyle.
We all sit over there, and then they can move the. Okay. We're ready. So thank you all for the great discussion today. I hope you have in you a little bit more. We're asking some questions today that will really give staff some guidance on how to go forward with our transportation development plan. Next. So this is an information item, but we do request guidance on the questions that were in the memo. I hope you all reviewed that memo. We've got a plan that is supposed to be updated every year. It hasn't been updated on an annual basis, in part because of all the funding questions that we've talked about today, in part because it's a difficult plan to put together based on some of the questions that we'll ask you today. So we're hoping to get those questions answered, build a plan that's more understandable for all of you and actually can be the tool that we envisioned it to be in terms of planning, both for the enhancement of transit in the region, but also in your budget planning. And if we get to that, then we recommend that rather than updating it every year, because it is built to be a little less dynamic than that, updating it every 2 years, and in the mid-year only offering those changes that are really required to make it work in that next year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen and Kyle to do a summary of what the plan is, where we hope to take it, and then afterward we'll get to the questions and ask all of you to help us develop the final part of it in the way that you provide guidance. So here's Stephen.
Thanks, Elaine. Stephen Hunt, Chief Development Officer of Valley Regional Transit. And as Elaine mentioned, we are updating our current transportation development plan because it is past due. The purpose of the transportation development plan is to provide a 5-year revenue and expense forecast. And that forecast is based on the anticipated service and necessary capital projects. And the most important point that I want to make here is that this is what drives our annual funding requests. This information that goes into the transportation development plan is the same thing that drives our annual funding requests that we make of each of our funding partners. And the projects that are in the TDP include maintenance projects, maintaining service, capital projects, vehicle replacement projects. They also include things like bus stop amenities and other special projects. Next slide. So once all the service and capital projects are identified, we categorize those projects into categorize all of the expenses and revenues, including federal, local, and directly generated revenues. And as we do with each of our as we do each year with our budget process, we apply our known revenues to those expenses, and we identify how much local funding is required to meet those expenses. And then using the cost allocation model, the needed local revenues are then distributed among our funding partners. And the outcome is a projected local need and forecast funding request for each of our funding partners. And those forecasts are tied to specific plan projects, which will be itemized for each of our funding partners for each year. So it provides a detailed plan for what each funding partner will be, what will be requested of each funding partner over those 5 years, and what makes up that request. Next slide. So Kyle's going to show you how that funding forecasts are categorized and how they're similar to our annual funding requests.
Hey, good afternoon, guys. Kyle over at VRT, planning programmer. So Stephen had mentioned we have 4 different categories for being able to explain what goes into our budget requests that we have of cities each year. So the first one is general, which supports our regional overhead expenses. It's based off of the various populations served, and it helps cover our costs for general overhead and planning and staffing, marketing activities related to that. The next one that we have is service, and that's line items such as gas, all the way to planning studies. A lot of these just get wrapped up into how many miles serves through each city's jurisdiction and how many revenue hours are going through that. And that's how those expenses get distributed. And then we have capital, which is a big one. That's what we're really hoping to get out of the transportation development plan. Certainly do a better job of communicating what those capital costs are and why that they're necessary. And so we are really excited to be more involved with having those discussions with each one of the jurisdictions that we hope can contribute to capital. As Elaine will probably mention, it's been mentioned before, capital is one of those expenses where, depending on how many, say, vehicle replacements or projects that land in each year, it's not always a linear amount. Sometimes it jumps up from year to year, depending on what projects that we're trying to achieve. Hence why it's so important that we are able to give those details out to the jurisdictions. And the last category is special, and that is for various projects that don't get distributed automatically to cities. Boise has some initiatives that pops off the top of my head in which they pay directly for a project. It doesn't go out to other cities, and then there's other negotiated agreements that we have with other cities, like an organization such as like a PASS program for Boise State or CWI. And those are the 4 categories that we have.
So just to recap, the TDP will provide a detailed forecast for each of our funding partners about what to expect our funding request will be for each of the 5 years. We'll also include everything that's behind that request, all of the capital and service plans that are behind that request. And want to really highlight, this is why the TDP is so important, is because we need to understand each agency's commitment to these assumptions that are in the transportation development plan, because it will directly influence what we as an organization are working towards and what the financial implications are for each of our funding partners. In addition, it provides an opportunity for VRT and our funding partners to develop a multi-year funding strategy so we can get ahead of things like the lumpy capital that that Kyle just mentioned and be prepared for discretionary grant opportunities. So if there are discretionary funding opportunities that are in front of us, we want to be prepared to take advantage of that, and the TDP provides an opportunity for those conversations. So between now and January, Kyle and I will be reaching out to each of your organizations to get input on the forecast funding requests that will be in the TDP. And now Elaine is going to lead us through some questions on how to develop those forecasts. Next slide.
Thank you. And for those of you who don't interact a lot with Kyle, just know that he's the wonky brains behind trying to figure out how to make all this stuff work. And I'm often in awe of how he can keep all of these numbers in his head for all of these different agencies that we serve and know exactly where everyone is. So thank you, Kyle. So we have some assumptions that we've based the TDP on. And in doing that, we want to make sure that those assumptions are understandable by all of you and that they flow with what you expected. First is that in the service category, we will continue existing service as is with an inflationary factor. Service enhancements, we're going to ask you the question here in a minute about what's the best way to show those in the TDP. Capital projects include very basic vehicle replacements, our service vehicles, our small vehicles, but not, we're going to ask you on those what we should do on the large vehicles and how we should project those in the future. It also includes all of the regular repair and maintenance for our facilities. Those include everything from operating that facility to the IT upgrades that we need to make sure that everything continues to run as is. Those are things I think you all face in your own budget, so pretty understandable, but just wanted to be clear that capital projects, as we're projecting them in the TDP today, include these basic things, and we're going to ask you about the bus replacements on the large buses and how to project those. There will be regular funding each year in the TDP for basic bus stop repair and improvements. So our bus stops typically have at least a sign. We're trying to get to the point where each of those bus stops has some kind of a bench, even if it's just a semi-seat on the sign. Beyond that, many of our medium to larger bus stops also require a concrete pad so that we can consider a shelter and some other amenities. So the budget that we build each year includes enough money to do that basic stuff. We are putting together a larger project for more involved bus stop enhancements, such as shelters, such as on-time, real-time information, trash cans, bike racks, various things like that. Those projects we'll bring to you if they can't be handled in that basic bus stop budget that we produce every year will be brought to you as special projects so that we can understand how much we can and should do in that particular year. And then special projects, as shown in the plan, will be unfunded, assuming that in order to go forward, we'll have to reach a funding agreement with our partners. And so an example of those special projects in the past has been the big enhancements, for instance, at our Orchard facility in Ada County, where we've been able to repave all of the 40-year-old pavement, upgrade it to, current good condition. We've been able to rebuild some of the infrastructure and add infrastructure for electric charging. We're now looking to do a special project to rebuild the compressed natural gas infrastructure, for instance. Those are the large end of special projects. The small end are things like the City of Meridian and funding the Meridian Veterans Shuttle so that veterans in Meridian have a way to get to the VA and get their healthcare needs met. And so on the large end, we have a lot of capital construction projects. On the small end, we might have something that your particular jurisdiction feels strongly about and sees a need for and is willing to step up and fund. And then finally, there will be a list of unfunded projects in this new TDP. We did not have that in there previously, and we never really had a way to talk about those things, but we knew they were out there and we knew they'd pop up and we'd have discussions. And so what we'd like to do is similar to what Compass does with their long-range plan. We have a 5-year plan, then we'll have a list of unfunded projects. And as they mature, as funding becomes available, or if somebody considers them a priority and we reach agreement, then we'll bring them into the plan as a funded project. So that's a basic assumption of how we'll organize the TDP. Next slide, please. And so the first question is, do you have any questions about those assumptions? Do they make sense to you?
Very good. Thank you so much. So with that, questions, Jason, I see your finger trigger there. Go for it.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I like everything I'm hearing here. I guess a couple format questions internal to the report. In so much as a lot of the funding, particularly for service, is voluntary.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a way to present it as perhaps a baseline and maybe an aspirational option, or an option that we consider if, you know, other revenue sources like a levy option were to come to be, what might be done with that. And I don't know that you'll have the ability to fully flush that out, but it might be the entry into sort of teasing what you might get for such a revenue enhancement.
Thank you. That's a great comment, and I think maybe feeds into that next question. Go ahead, Jason, if you'll go to the next one, which is, no, yeah, that one. What is the best way to present planned service enhancements? So in the past, we just put them in the TDP in a plan year somewhere out there, assuming that that would let us and the service partner begin negotiations and plans in that budget year for budgeting that. But another option would be that we present those in special projects, again, in that plan year that we'd like to consider it, but recognizing that special projects all require that negotiation and agreement to go ahead and fund it. And then the third option would be to just list them in the unfunded and not put a project year and let them mature as funding becomes available. So I guess that's the next question. I don't know if anyone has any strong opinions one way or another about the best way to do it.
Any other questions in here? Anybody online with some questions or comments? See a head shake and nothing else. Okay, very good.
So with that, and given Board Member Brinkman's comments, I will suggest that what we'll bring back in the TDP in January is that we'll put those service enhancements in the special project list in a fund year so that we can begin negotiations toward them, and recognizing that the TDP will be updated every 2 years and small updates every year, and they can move in and out as things mature or don't, if that makes sense.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just as a question on the service model, like you purposely reconfigured your electric transition and natural gas. How is that going to be projected into the future in terms of this plan? Alternatives, I guess, is what I'm saying, because you exercised an alternative this year on purpose because of the situation. That kind of anticipation.
Well, thank you. So for those of you who haven't been as in the loop and as Commissioner Daly and what we're doing, we had planned to purchase 8 more electric buses with a grant that we will exercise next year. We were given the option to adjust that grant if we wanted, and in working with the city of Nampa, closely with them as they are working on their renewed natural gas project at their wastewater treatment plant, we instead asked FTA if we could adjust our electric bus purchases to a few electrics and mostly compressed natural gas buses. And what that will do is 2 things. It will save some money because CNG buses are considerably cheaper at the moment. And it will also allow us to sort of balance our energy use and needs between electric and compressed natural gas so that we're both diversified in, I think, a very healthy way, but also have some choices going forward depending on how the energy market matures or doesn't over the next 20 or 25 years. So you're absolutely right that that move has required us to really re-examine our vehicle needs and vehicle costs. And to be honest with you, I don't have specific answers yet. We're in the process right now of going through all of our vehicle needs going forward. And instead of the presumption that all of the big buses would be replaced with electric buses, we'll now be balancing that between electric and compressed natural gas, and also being able to move our small fleet toward more energy efficient options because of the cost savings. So part of what we plan to do in January is bring to you a more mature plan about how that's all going to play out as we've worked through those details.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you. And that's the dynamics of this plan to allow for the kind of thing you're talking about on the spur of the moment to be able to do what you did. Does this put that into the plan, I guess, is my request.
That's absolutely true. Do you have something to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, Mr. Chair, is that would be the reason for the annual, for updating the plan, like as with any financial plan, something like that would just be folded into the future updates because it does have ripple effects.
Okay, next slide, please. So last 3 questions, I think, actually, yeah. So large bus replacements, we got into this a little bit with this conversation about electric versus CNG, but regardless, large bus replacements are very expensive compared to all our other vehicles, $750,000 and up per bus, depending on which propulsion type. And so the match that's required for those is quite substantial and creates not a level incline in costs, but a real lumpy trajectory in those costs. So the next question is, should we stay with that lumpy trajectory, recognizing that each of you will have to then plan for either more or less of an assessment in that particular year, or should we try to smooth those out over the 5-year plan? If we smooth them out, there might be some small adjustments here and there, some delay, if you will, by a year or 2 in some of those replacements, but not very much, a little bit. If we don't smooth them out, then as I mentioned, you will have to figure out which year that lump's going to be in and whether or not you can budget for it. And so, again, I'm kind of agnostic, to be honest, but recognizing from my past experience as a city council member how much easier it is, especially with base budget, if you have more natural incline rather than lumpiness.
Yeah, I think it's much knowing the consistency of it and being pretty, obviously not exact, but knowing pretty sure that this is what it's going to be without getting a lump on top of that. And then also just making sure they're dedicated funding column, whatever it is, so it's protected, so you don't come in, well, we're short this year. Well, we got this money right here. We could pull it and plug it in there. Then we do end up having to do that. So just those would be my two thoughts, but I don't know if there's other discussion or thoughts. Commissioner Daly?
Yes, I would agree with you that the certainty is better than all of a sudden springing a lump sum kind of a thing. So the more we can plan for certainty, the better, as you well know, because you've been in a budget process that we are in. So.
Any other thoughts from anyone online? Look good?
Right.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yes, Jason, sorry.
Just to clarify my prior comment, and maybe I was jumping ahead a little bit. If the direction of the board were to look at a leveling option, then I think that speaks well to more of a base budget presentation. To me, the special category infers almost a capital or one-time implication rather than, say, an ongoing service enhancement or ongoing vehicle structure. So I think I, for one, would be in favor of the team that puts the plan together, having a little bit of discretion in the actual semantics of the titles and the terminology to make sure that it comes across clearly. And that may even extend to the name of the plan. I love that it's called the Transportation Development Plan, since transit's such an integral part of transportation. But for those that might pick up the plan for reference, maybe it's the Transit Transportation Development Plan or the Transit Development Plan.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's a really good point. Bus replacements, as Leslie mentioned in her conversation about the vehicle donation policy, really are planned investments that if they don't get made, make it difficult to run the service the way that we need to. And so they're not the same as a typical capital project investment, which you can put off if you don't have the money that year. So I appreciate what Mayor Wagner said, is that if we do smooth it out, we ensure that we put that into a fund that is actually set aside for those vehicles. I would say our new ERP system, which, by January, I'm hoping we have a really in-depth discussion about it because it's finally maturing. We're finally getting everything online. As that happens, we'll be able to create those separate funds within our revenue category for various things. And while they're not, I guess, legally restricted from being spent on something else, by putting them in a fund and making that transparent to the board, I think it would be very difficult to spend them otherwise without some real thought put into that. So that would be our intent if we do this leveling out, if that makes sense.
Okay. Next question.
All right. Well, the last two, and I'll do this one, then I'll let Stephen and Kyle speak to the last one about how important it is, the work that they're doing and how hard it is to do it in depth every year. But one of the things we've run into, and I think this also speaks to Board Member Brinkman's comments, these last comments, we have some projects out there that we've been unable to fund, even though they're important projects, they're capital projects that we can get by without doing. We're at the point with a couple of them where it's becoming much more difficult to get by, and wondering if board members are willing and able to think about talking to us about doing some of those capital projects as one time, recognizing that these are still tough budget years for everyone. I get that, but recognizing that traditionally there's been a little bit more leeway in capital budgets in various organizations, and potentially there'd be an opportunity to do one-time capital funding for some of these projects so that we can get them off the books and out of the way, move forward with real planning for the future. And I just wanted to bring that up today because it's been an ongoing challenge for the organization. With the previous TDP, I don't think there was a great understanding of where those capital projects fell and why they were important. And so I think going forward, really having the opportunity to talk individually to each of you about some of them and looking for some of that one-time funding so that we can get them done when those opportunities arise would be really helpful for us. I just wanted to broach it with all of you and see if you're willing to start having those discussions.
Good. Thank you so much. Discussion on that. Commissioner Daly.
I guess, would it be useful to you if we had in our budget process delineate, because we generally just give you a block of money. So would it be useful, even though you give us a recommendation on capital and general expenditures, would it be useful for us to delineate that for you? In other words, we give you $400,000, we want to do this for capital, that for whatever. Would that be useful to you, or do you want us to just do it as a?
I think that's exactly what we're looking for. If we can come to you now and outline what those overhanging capital needs are and talk about, can you over time perhaps find a way to help us fund some of those at the same time you're funding the ongoing base on the other hand. To me, that would be exactly what we'd be looking for.
Good. Anybody online with any thoughts on that one? Okay, very good. Looks like you're down to the last.
Back one, Elaine asked Kyle and I to speak to this last one, which is just recommending moving the update of the TDP officially from every year to every other year. We had anticipated doing this as an every year process where you update it. It's proved our current transportation development or transportation development plan is 2023 to 2027. So we're in a real bind to update it now because we're getting at the end of that horizon year, but it has proven very difficult to do on an annual basis. So what we will propose doing is changing that from every year to every other year. And I think one thing I would highlight is it's really critical that we are able to do that within essentially the first quarter of whatever year it is. Because if we get past January and we start talking about a 5-year funding plan, inevitably it just defaults to the current year budget because that's where everybody's mind is at. And so that's the other thing that's made it difficult to do is the window to doing this 5-year plan really is just essentially the first quarter of the fiscal year before we dive into the current year's budget process. So we're proposing to move that to every other year, which will keep us well within the planning horizon of the TDP and allow us to make the adjustments. Commissioner Daly, as you were suggesting, if there are things that come up year to year, but saving any big updates to every other year.
Commissioner Daly.
Mr. Chairman, actually, that was one of the questions I was going to ask towards the end is in terms of this, are there other things you dovetail with? Like we have fiscal years and calendar years and 2 fiscal years because our county fiscal years are not the state fiscal years. So is there any other dynamic like that that would be useful to you to work in your timing so that you're not doing 3 things at the same time and then not fitting with the parameters? I guess that was one of my questions, because we have that same problem with the state and the federal. We're on the federal fiscal year, but not on the state fiscal year for counties.
I guess I would pipe in here. One thing that occurs to me is that as we work with both campus, which is on the federal year, and ACHD, which tends to do their 5-year work plan review prior to the calendar year or their fiscal year turning over, we are then informed by the time we reach our fiscal year, our first quarter, about what things are coming forward in those processes. So this first quarter really does become that kind of key time to work on this.
So I guess I would like whatever work fits best, I guess, would be you figure out what works best in terms of all those juggling that you have to do.
Or anything? Any other thoughts, comments? Anybody online? Okay.
All right, well, thank you. We will take that as guidance, just at your conversation that we've had as we've gone forward. We'll bring forward to you the Transportation Development Plan for approval in January. In the meantime, we will come up with a draft probably within the next month and begin talking to each of you offline about some of the key things in that draft to make sure that we are hitting on all of the issues that we talked about today. All right.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we still got the chance to get out of here on time. So our next item is again, an information item from Mr. Hunt. So we'll go right into that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Oh, man. Oh, I need to reshare. Hang on. Oh, really quickly. Now, going from the future to the present. We were talking about the Transportation Development Plan, and I just wanted to provide an update on our FY26 funding request update. This is a request of the board to look at. So just a brief reminder of everything we just talked about. We have an annual funding process where we ask for funding from each of our funding partners. That's developed off of a draft budget, and we apply all of our known revenues to that. We then categorize those expenses into the general service, capital, and special that Kyle just talked about, and we match all of those assessments accordingly if they're funded federally, and that gives us the local that we need, that we then distribute to our revenue, to our funding partners, whether that be city, counties, or special partners. This year, that is FY26, the total local funding request that was in the draft budget was $12.9 million. And what was included in all of our, when we looked at all of our member budgets, the total was 12.8 million, with a difference of just under 2%. Looking at the two counties, we're about 1% under in Ada County and a little over 6% in Canyon County. Breakdown of that by agency, we have 5 executed contracts in Ada County. That's with Ada County, CCDC, City of Boise, Garden City, and the City of Meridian. 5 others were awaiting signatures. We don't expect to have any issues with obtaining those signatures. And we had 1 funding partner to decline our funding request this year. In Canyon County, we have 4 executed agreements. That's with the City of Caldwell, Melba, and the College of Western Idaho and the Nampa Highway District. We have 3 awaiting signatures. And again, we don't anticipate any issues with that. That's just a process of getting those signatures finalized. And we had 7 different agencies in Canyon County that declined our funding request for this year. As I mentioned, in total, that brings us to about just under 2% short, which means as we go into FY26, we'll continue to finalize those cooperative agreements and invoice for those local funds, and we will track our 2026 budgets to ensure that we're able to stay in the black and adjust our projects accordingly to make up the difference. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
And this is not out of line with what we've had historically. We've, over the years, grown and lost a few agencies here and there. This is about where we've been. When I was hired, made a commitment to try and bring more of our partners into the active status. We're continuing to work on that. I think we're certainly having productive discussions with many of them.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Any questions from anyone in regards to those numbers? Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Stephen. Appreciate it. And the last item, 7D, is just the procurement calendar. So if you do have any, questions in regards to that, you can reach out to Jason for that. Okay, and I do not believe we have an executive session we need to go into.
No executive session today.
Okay, very good. Then would just also reference you to department staff reports towards the end of the packet as well. And with that, we are adjourned at this time, and we'll be back on January 5th of 2026. Everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all. It's appreciated.
Thank you
for
all.
your work. Mhm.